biggest battle left in the Prem is really the fight for a spot in European competition next year. Manchester City's win moved them from 5th to 3rd on the table, ahead of Nottingham Forest and Newcastle, and Aston Villa sit 7th. Now let's take a listen to what Man City manager Pep Guardiola had to say on the importance of this result.
If we win the next 4 games, have been so important, yeah. Of course it's important. We don't have to be a scientist to realize that we play against Aston Villa, one of the best teams. We saw the games against Newcastle, saw the games against PSG, the top form, the quality, the manager, and everything. So it's an extraordinary team, but we did perform like we were in the past. The commitment, we concede not much, and we didn't create much neither, but we control most of the game. The back four again have been amazing, all the players. So in terms of qualification for the Champions League, for the points, of course, it's important. But in the same times, we have to be calm and focus in the semi-final, and after you have days to prepare the 4 finals. 2 games at home, 2 away, and game by game.
This season has done a number on Pep. I have never seen him like this. It's just strange to see Pep with these gestures that you've never seen before. It's interesting. It's an interesting psychological happenstance between the poor results from Manchester City this season and the reaction from Pep.
But poor results, yes, they're not winning the title. Yes, they're not dominating, but they're sitting in 3rd still, guys. I mean, how do you grade the performance? He's having a bit of a crash out, but they are sitting in 3rd place.
Yeah, I guess if you're Manchester City, it's a poor performance, right? Because the expectation is that you're at the top of the Premier League table because that's the standard that they set.
Absolutely, and even the way he started that shot that we listened to with his head in his hands, I think is very interesting to see how he ended the game with his emotions and how excited he was after that goal was scored. And he talked about it. He was like, this was everything. Like, this was us winning this game meant so much to them. When you think about in the context of Manchester City, if we talked about it prior to the season even starting, we would have said this game doesn't matter that much for them, right? They'll be sitting at the top of the table. They'll maybe be in a fight for the Premier League title, competing with whoever else at the top. So to see it in context right now, you kind of feel bad for them at points. Like, this is such a disappointment in the grand scheme of things, yet they're so happy for these little tiny moments.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily feel bad for Manchester City, a team that's won absolutely everything, having one off season, and Pep Guardiola, arguably the greatest manager ever, trying to right the ship, and this is all their own doing, right? They're in this position not because of anybody else, because they had a capitulation in October. From October to December, they were a shell of themselves. They were unrecognizable. However you want to qualify it, disaster, I think, is the nicest way that we can qualify what was happening at City. And yeah, sure, they're 3rd place in the Prem. For Nottingham Forest, you've told Nottingham Forest, they would, yeah, but the expectations are different. When you spend this amount of money, when you have won the Prem, we saw how many Prems they've won in the last, 7 years? They've won 6 or something like that? What's the stat? I forget.
Is it 5 and 6?
And 5? Okay, yeah. That's extraordinary. That's never happened before. That's superlative. It's not extraordinary. It's the best of the best. So when you fall off the mark so significantly, and especially when it's so unexpectedly, I think it says a lot about Pep and the way that this team has been able to finally kind of refocus.
So then how would you guys grade the way Pep has been able to manage this Manchester City team? Because they also have C+. Given they haven't had Haaland in a while. They've had lots of moving parts. C+, what would you guys give?
Yeah, I put it, when we were talking this morning, I put down a C. He has had injuries, but they are deep, right? And that run that they went on, where yesterday was a picture of what we saw in the recent past with Pep's teams, is that they find a way to win games, right? There was a stretch for 3 months where they were finding every way you could to lose games. And that stretch I can't get over when I'm thinking about giving Pep a grade, right? Because his teams were still better, they were deeper, and I say better, whatever ratings you put in your head about players, right? We looked at the names on the piece of paper and said, Man City is better than this opponent or this opponent, and they still couldn't find ways to win games. So for me, it's a C.
I would say A B minus. I'm going to give them a B minus. Yes, they did terribly in Champions League, but I think that you got to recover, right? And it's also your grade comes down to how you finished. And right now they're sitting in third in the Premier League. They brought in players like Marmoush to aid to this crisis in the attacking line, to contribute to what they're going to do and have a little bit more depth. I think that they've recovered.
Yeah, but I think that's going as high as a B. Like my mom would be happy if I walked into the house with a B. I'm a B minus on my report card. I think that's passable,
gosh.
Right?
My house is a little tougher.
Yeah, it was all right. I mean, I don't think she was happy, but I walked with a B minus, and she would be like, okay, you can do better.
There's no chance you got a B minus in school. Just
In
saying.
anything.
In anything. Yeah.
No,
I just want to get that off my chest.
A's and B's. My mom wouldn't be thrilled, but she wouldn't be disappointed. I think this is a disappointing season for Manchester City, and I think anything in the B realm is a little bit of recency bias that they've been able to right the ship. They were so bad. They were horrible. It was a disaster. It was like City I've never seen before. It was Pep at his lowest at the beginning of the season.
So isn't it even more impressive that they could right the ship?
Lisa, I think they were at a D minus at best in that streak where they were losing games or they were not winning games in sensational fashion. They were not winning games. And the fact that they got to right the ship and finish third, completely eliminated from I would say humiliated out of the Champions League, barely making the knockout stage. Club Brugge had the knife against the neck, and they managed to swiggle their way through that and make it to the knockout stage, and then humiliated against a pretty bad Real Madrid side. To me, you can't go higher than a C+. Now, I talked myself down to a C now at this point, instead of a C+, personally.
So the longer we go, the worse the grade gets for Manchester.
Careful, by the end of the show, it's going to be an F. All right, so Nico, I want to take a look at Man City's remaining schedule because Opta has predicted that whoever finishes in fifth place is going to finish the season with 68 points. To put it into perspective, Manchester City is currently at 61 points. So here's the remaining schedule for Manchester City. Give me your quick predictions on what you think the results will be.
Let's go one by one, and we're shooting for 69, right? So Manchester City at this point, at 61, I'm giving them a draw against Wolves. Wolves is in really good form. Obviously, a win against Southampton because I think Stamford FC could beat Southampton at this point. Bournemouth, give them 3 points against Bournemouth. I think that's a really big game for them. And at Fulham, last game of the season, Craven Cottage is going to be a fun one. +1, so a draw. And that puts them at 69. And we're going for
68.
For 60. Okay, so good enough.
Give them one
that puts them in top 5.
You guys agree?
That checks
with
out.
The results.
I think that also it goes on par with what we talked about yesterday with this team being able to make it into the top 5. I think a lot of where this stems on also comes from their win last night.
What grade would you give him, and are you as forgiving as Lisa, or maybe a little bit harder like the guys were on him?
Yeah, good question, Claudia. First of all, I absolutely agree with Nico's description of Jeremy Udoko when he scorched the Aston Villa defence. I mean, what a run and what a pass as well. And Pep Guardiola said he is the best in the world over the first 5 yards. And I think he may well have a point there. It's a tough one. It's actually a good debating point. I thought it was a good discussion you were having because, yes, by their imperious standards, it's been a terrible, terrible season. They've fallen away. So many players out of form, injuries, you name it. They've had the lot to contend with. But then what do? You can either sulk, you can say, let's just write this season off. They went heavy in the transfer window in January. They've reinvented themselves. Pep Guardiola said, before last night, these remaining 5 games, they are 5 cup finals. That's how seriously they're taking qualification for the Champions League because it makes a huge difference to their budget and in terms of what they can spend, etc. So I'm somewhere between a B and a C. I'm mindful of a very, very poor season by their exalted standards. But at the same time, we're all human. There are frailties and they've had to cope with an awful lot. Yes, they've spent a lot of money previously. Yes, they should have planned better. But they are where they are and they're rallying and they're fighting and they're showing the qualities of champions, even if they aren't fighting for the championship itself. So I don't know if that's me sitting on the fence, but somewhere between the two.
Geoff, yesterday confirmed something that I was hoping to see. Actually, it confirmed that I'm not going to see it next year, which is Manchester City traveling to Kazakhstan in the Conference League in the freezing cold of December.
You're a mean man.
It's such a shame we're not going to get to see that. It feels, Geoff, at this point, that Manchester City made a statement and said, although we might not be champions, we're starting to get back to who we are, and top 5 is a real possibility at this point.
Yeah, 100% Nico. I think as well, they've had a look at the diary and they've looked at the other clubs and they've just gone, nah, we don't do Thursdays. We're a Tuesday, Wednesday type of guys. We are not available on a Thursday. It's not happening for us. Yeah, they want to be amongst Europe's elite. They want to be in that competition. The other thing as well, of course, you've got the subtle, or if you like, the subplot. Yesterday, as well as a hammer blow for Aston Villa in terms of Champions League qualification, this could, although Palace and Forest will have something to say about it, that could have been a dress rehearsal for the FA Cup final. Because, of course, it is Forest City and Palace against Villa at the weekend. So they might meet again in the FA Cup final, possibly, which could give them a little edge if that is the lineup for the FA Cup final. But no, big win last night. Lots of good performances all round. And let's not take it away from them as well. They beat a really good Aston Villa side, an on-song side. I mean, Marcus Rashford, he took the eye. He was absolutely sensational. I mean, hit the post in the first 19 seconds. It could have been a very different story. So I really enjoyed the game. I thought it was a really good game of football. It had a bit of spikiness about it, a bit of an edge. What there definitely was there was a determination and an urgency. It was like both sets of players. They knew the size of the prize that potentially is on offer, and that's why they both went for it.